anybody who takes that without permission from Mr. Deagle himself gets shot.
I found it.
Oh,
Got it.
Today, the 30th day of December, 1992, the good ship Miss Anne hopefully will be relaunched and enjoy a rebirth at the tide's end. She's been at the yard, Deagle's Marine Railway, since sometime in the spring of '92, having been tied up with Coast Guard regulations and requirements since '91. Miss Anne's entire hull has been replaced with very few exceptions. The bow has been replaced, virtually all steel below the portholes, and many of the porthole area, much above the porthole area, has been replaced. On the tractor is our very own Randy Stevens, the general contractor and major domo of this project. Presently, he is loading ingots or pieces of lead ballast that we're using for the incline test on the boat. Here today to see all of this activity are a number of people, including, of course, Randy's lovely wife Tamara with Murgatroyd in tummy. We've got Annalise Stevens-Carrere. We have Libby Stevens-Hickey. I hope we'll see her face a little bit later. We have, of course, Jared Stevens, the Honorable J. Harry Michael Jr. There's Mom with her best hat and her nicest smile, Ennell Stevens, Harper. There's Bob Lee somewhere in the back.
You can tell me by the pain look on my face.
The pained look on his wallet. And then we also have some of the other kids and friends here. We have Nell and Marty Stevens Johnson and Karen Stevens, and Catherine Sanders is watching Harry and Rob Stevens. There are also Stevens Johnson and Chase Johnson and Richard Carrere, and Richard's friend Christopher's in the mix there somewhere. Certainly not least, we have some Hennigans other than Nell. Dan is not here, but here is the youngest Hennigan. That is Bridget McGuire Hennigan. Also here, but not yet seen, are Scott Stevens, who is down at the boat helping, along with Thomas Scott Stevens. And I believe that we also have a couple other cousins. You never get them all. You can see right now the bits of lead that are being loaded on to the crane, which lifts them up and puts them aboard Miss Anne. These bits of lead will be used once the boat is in the water to put it from one side to another, and that will enable the naval architect, George Zahn, to determine the stability of Miss Anne. The stability before this project was very good. We expect it to remain as good or perhaps be improved. There's still some things to be done on Miss Anne. You can see the railing is not complete all the way around. The railing has been raised. Originally it was about 32 to 36 inches tall. It is now closer to 40 inches in order to comply with Coast Guard requirements. George Zahn has been the marine architect on this project. George is from Gloucester and has done a super job, or we think he has, but if she goes in the water and turns turtle, we'll probably withhold his last payment. You can see some of the stern of Miss Anne, her brand new shafts, her brand new transom, slightly different look, but I think they did a very good job. That was completely rebuilt. Notice how small the rudder is. That still turns her. You'll see that the screws are not that large. There's still plenty of clearance between the hull, but keep in mind that Miss Anne typically cruises at something around 13 knots. She will go down this railway to launch, and you will see that we have a diver who happens to also be the sheriff of Middlesex County, Lou Jones from Charlottesville. Lou is going to go in the water to determine whether that there are any impediments or obstructions downstream of the railway. Miss Anne's been aboard, or been on the railway for so long that a boat could have sunk there and they wouldn't have known, because no other boat has come down. So give you a look at some of the other cousins who are here. Oh, they've all left, but you can see there's Lauren Hennigan with Nell, who I didn't mention before, and also she's now moved, but Scott's eldest daughter, Grace. And here's Rob running in front of us, and Harry. This is certainly a family event. I'll pan back to the left. Deagle's Marine Railway, full service, commercial and yachts. On the upper deck, you will see two black cylinders. Those are spark arresters that will go into the stack. Exhaust for each of the engines will go through those to prevent any sparks from throwing out. They also, I believe, have some muffler effects. I'd like to zoom in on some of the changes we've made. You'll notice that there is now a door on the aft part of the house. That door is a head on both port and starboard sides. There is a head. I believe the starboard side is the ladies' head and the port side is the men's head. Likewise, forward, we've put in some doors on the main deck which allow access into the rest facilities. Some of the talent that has worked on Miss Anne is Luke on the left and Ronnie Jones on the right. Ronnie has been more recently aboard as a subcontractor, and Luke has been part of Randy's crew. Some of the welders that we have here, or one of them, is welding on the numbers. I won't look for too long, but putting on the additional depth. You'll see some, show you some modifications on the hull. Notice here where the shaft is supported, that is extra thick steel there to give greater strength. Good place to see all the weld lines of the different panels put together. I'll go up the hull a bit and you will see where some of the portholes were. They've been covered over, again, to comport with the Coast Guard regulations. However, there are still a number of portholes remaining. Go up the hull and you'll see she still kept her graceful lines. They've bent the steel well, and we certainly hope that she's going to float as well, as gracefully as she always has. If you look closely, and I'll try to reflect it in this picture, hopefully you can see the difference between the riveted hull construction in the area of the portholes and the welded hull construction down below, making that the two constructions meet was difficult in that the heat applied to the welds prompted or sometimes would cause the weld heads to pop. As an example of that, I will pan right and show you. You'll notice in the hull, or correction, on the keel, all of the keel is still the original, and it was a series of steel plates held together with rivets. Deagle's welders had to go around and ring weld each of the heads of the rivets to ensure that they would not pop loose later on. Again, more Coast Guard metallurgy. Another view of where she'll be launched. You can see the diver in the water. He's just gone down below. When there's no boat to be watching, resourceful mothers will take advantage of whatever shipyard tools there may be to entertain the kids. Here we have a giant swing, aka 50-ton travel lift. The children entertaining themselves to some extent. The crew up on the hill exhibiting some patience. Mr. Deagle, Ed Deagle, is standing to the left, and Billy, not sure Billy's last name's on the right. Billy's been the Deagle yard foreman on this job. On, I'm just saying, another change that we made, as I mentioned earlier, but you can see it a little bit better here, is on the side, on the main deck, you can see the door that goes into another head. Randy is cutting off some of the brackets that have been attached to the hull since the boat's been there, helping to keep her steady. Randy's climbing the ladder with torch in his right hand to cut off that after stanchion. You'll notice too that the crane is now attached to the gangway to remove her when the time comes. See some slag falling. Randy's cutting.
How you doing, young man?
Holy, how you doing?
Holy, you look like you're $1 million there, man.
Sitting right here watching.
There's nothing wrong with that. Something to watch. It's amazing, I can tell you that.
Like watching other people work.
I like
None like?
I like to be able to be in that position one day.
Some of the crew talking with Judge Michael.
I'm just glad that he didn't come.
You're right. Removing the blocks. There was a block underneath the stern there, and that has been completely removed now. More significantly at issue right now is the tracks underwater. The diver has found that the tracks are no longer parallel, having come about 2-3 inches apart down in the water. So he is going down with a come-along, which he will attach to the dock and try to pull the downstream track so that it is even with the track that at the top of the railway. It's presently 1 o'clock. We will see how long it takes him to correct that. You'll see that they've put the extra watermark on the port rear. And what's the project presently at hand is to cut into the side room, a hole for the port stern line to go through into the bit inside. Notice the high gloss
That's all right. It's a safe
of that
one.
brass that Randy's got. The bits are the same way.
Right.
Where the top is, see, that's cut a hole. 1 inch hole.
Either that or
Yeah, just put it right here and blow through.
No, you don't have to get right on the edge. Well, that's all right. You can do that too. Put it on the edge and
I
blow
just
through.
put it through and blow through.
Fine. That gives you the mark.
Mark. Who's Mark anyway? I don't know. Vince Monkey?
Down low. He wants to go right at the edge of the right there.
Looks like the sun may come out. That would be a delightful event.
More boats hanging off the side.
Unfortunately. As we look here, you will see that the railing is complete all the way back. The reason for that is the Coast Guard doesn't particularly like the lifeboats that we've always had. Ironically, what they would prefer is a rescue boat, is a term of art. A rescue boat has to be less than 13.5 feet long and lighter than 250 pounds, so it can be picked up and thrown overboard. What we had before were a couple of Boston whalers with engines that obviously were too heavy to pick by hand. But even though that made more sense, if the power goes out, the Coast Guard argues, then you couldn't deploy the boat and couldn't retrieve people overboard.
Something like a Zodiac.
I think it has to be rigid, so we will probably end up getting something akin to a John boat that has styrofoam float reinforcement in the sides. Getting close to cutting through all the way. The Deagle is not a man to let something happen in his yard without being integrally involved. Oh, timber! The fellow over there talking to Deagle with the cap on is the Coast Guard inspector. Yeah, Lieutenant J.G. Bob. Yeah, Bob, what's your last name?
Got to know him right well, huh?
Oh, he's been over here with Randy awful frequently, 2 and 3 times a week. Bob Studebaker, how could I forget? You know, one of those things that's outmoded, defunct.
Since the beginning.
No, it was a big steam engine before, I believe. It was certainly much larger engines than there are now.
Must be an interesting power plant.
Huge. If you go in the engine room, you'll see how much space there is now.
Yeah.
I believe that her screws were considerably larger than they are now. You'll see how much clearance there is. You see here that they've put in the brass grommet escutcheon into the hole. So hopefully the lines won't chafe. That one, yeah. Is that a bilge pump? This is a slide train. Yeah. Slow slide train. But the sun's coming out. You know the number at Taylor's?
We just gonna move it back a foot, and then we got to grease all the wheels.
Yeah. Dive around down there. Just don't let it keep going.
That's right.
Good man.
Dad was just saying, be sure that the that we make sure the inspection party gets back from lunch. They're at Taylor's in Deltaville eating lunch, and if we launch her completely without them being here, we're in deep trouble.
I'll be in Fat City when she floats.
We will move her back a foot in order to grease the railway wheels.
I thought you were going to pick it up and bring it over here. I was hoping that I get a massive bodies.
Here we have coming by the mast on Miss Ann.
Now.
Carried to be in the place to be lifted by crane up on her. Being removed. And the proud Bob Lee up on the top deck. Miss Ann's almost free from land, ready to re-enter the sea. And that the boat's been on. Hey Mom, could you scoot aside for a sec? Thanks.
Okay.
Greasing each of the wheel bearings, and that the Miss Ann's been on the railway so long that the wheels of the railway have grown stiff. We don't want to drag it down, we want it to wheel it down. Everyone's gotten back from Taylor's now. 15 hungry folks ate for a whopping 63 bucks, best deal in town. Now we can launch. We have some repairs going on the chain that lowers the railway back into the water. Expect those to be remedied forthwith. It is presently 2:15 p.m. It's now 2:50, and Billy has hollered, "Everybody get out from behind the boat." We're taking tension up on the chain. She's going. There she's going. She's going down to the water. People running all over the place.
What's the word?
We got a lot of slack on that ball down again.
Yeah, well, that was far enough, right? That's far enough.
Oops, we're holding because there's slack in the haul down. The haul down apparently being the...
Here he is.
We're moving. The battery's a little bit weak, but we are going down. We are going back. And forward, and you see the problem was on the chain that is on the bottom. That is the take-up chain. The heavy chain that lowers it back obviously isn't even tight. See the anchor there on the port bow?